Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I am your host, Maureen, and I am so glad to be back here with you today. I need to apologize again for the lateness of this video. As you know, COVID hit our house. I think we had it, my husband and I had it 20 days ago, and or we had it for this is day like 23 since we had COVID. So my children had to undergo 2 quarantines, so they have been in my house, unable to leave for 22 days. So it's been really difficult for me to record podcasts and to get them out to you, and I have to wait for quiet moments. And those with 3 children, let me tell you, that doesn't happen very often. So I am hoping with their quarantine is done today. But it's Labor Day, so it's Labor Day in the United States. I don't know who else has a Labor Day holiday. I don't know if any other country does that or any other country has some variation of a Labor Day, but today is our Labor Day, so everything's closed today basically. But they are still in the house, so you may hear something. I apologize if you hear anything other than myself. Maybe I'll put some background music in over that. I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I can do that. But from here on out, they're quarantined. Like I said, they're quarantined today. So from here on out, I should be able to record during the day without any interruptions. So here's hoping. We're gonna root for that. We're gonna pray for that, and we're just gonna believe that that's gonna happen. So today, I'm very excited. As you see, we usually have 2 pictures up here. We have only one today. Only one picture of the amazing, the beautiful Esther Denham. Now you can't see this, but I'm recording on my Nikon, and it it squares in on faces, and it focuses on Esther's face, and I love that. Now today's not an Esther spotlight. I should have done her spotlight first, but we were going through a Tom thing, so we finished up Tom's character arc, and now we're moving into Esther Denham. So for the next 3 character episodes, you guys are getting a dose of Esther. Yes. She's my favorite. She's my favorite, even over Charlotte. Esther Denham is my favorite character in the whole show. I love her. I love her portrayal. I love the layers to her. I love the complexity of her character. I love the script that they wrote for her. And I love how Charlotte Spencer portrayed Esther. Just perfection. I love it. Love it. So even though today is not a character spotlight on Esther, she's going to be very heavily featured in this. We are talking Edward and Esther today. And although Edward is not my favorite character, I absolutely love what Jack Fox did with that character. Love it. I absolutely love it. I think Jack Fox is hilarious. I think that I love when he interacts with fans, and he's got like my sense of humor. He's very dry and sarcastic, and I love that. So because I like I like how he interacts with fans, almost as if he's Edward Denham, I can't help but like Edward's character. I don't like what he does, and I certainly don't like how he does my girl dirty. But that phrase felt really unnatural coming out of my mouth. I think I'm too old for that phrase. But I do love what he did with that character. And there is a scene, and I think I mentioned this last week, but there is a scene in the beginning. He had sprained his ankle right before that first ball scene, so he can't really move around a lot, so it's a lot of upper body stuff. But there is a scene when it's right when he pulls away. It's not even with Tom. It's when he pulls away from Charlotte, and he kind of does this little, like, I don't know. It gives me the giggles every time I see it. I don't even know why. It's not even a bad dance. It's just, I think it's a culmination of the expression on his face and the way he moves his arms because he can't really use his feet that I just found hilarious. And then, of course, there's that scene in the same ball scene when him and Tom are there, and they both kind of look like they're taking flight. And I don't know, there's just something about him that's so, I think it's because his character is funny, and they wrote his character a little sarcastic. They wrote his character a little, he's selfish and he's egotistical and he's arrogant, but they wrote him sarcastic, and they wrote him with a really dry wit, and I really connect with characters like that. Maybe that says something about me. I don't know. Maybe that just says that I have issues that I need to work out on my own. That's entirely possible. There's only a couple scenes where I genuinely don't like Edward, where he stops becoming the lovable cad. But Esther Denham, I don't think there's ever a scene I don't like her in. I don't think there's ever a time when I don't like her. Even when she first, now, we talked a little bit about this in our recap of episode 1. But when we first see Esther, we see her with Edward. She stands off a little behind him, right? When they come into town, into Trafalgar House, they come in there. I'm really sorry, guys. Like, we're we are working on our house, and we're trying to get all of our children in separate rooms before they go back to school. And there's like, we're building a bed into the wall, and there's just wood shavings and dust everywhere. And you're going to see me itching my nose a lot, and you're going to see the video kind of cut in and out a little bit because I will be sneezing. So I'm going to edit all my sneezes out. So I really am sorry that I keep putting my hands in front of my face. But when we first see them, Esther Denham is standing a little bit behind Edward, and they both come in very haughty. Their shoulders are high, their shoulders are back, their necks are high, and even Edward kind of looks down, like his chin is angled up, and he kind of looks down at everybody. Esther does the same thing. She kind of mirrors him when we first see them. The time when she no longer mirrors him is when he lays eyes on Charlotte, cad that he is. And he's very intrigued by her beauty, by her youth, by her... I really think that Edward truly enjoys corrupting people. I really think he enjoys it. I think he was successful in corrupting Esther. I don't think he really corrupted Esther, because you can see that her heart is still good throughout the whole show, but he has jaded her a little bit. He has turned her from... I imagine that as a child. No, it's her... She says her mother married his father, so it's her dad that dies. And if you were a woman or a family, and it was the head of the house, the man who died, you were in some trouble. I mean, yes, you could, like Eliza, your husband could have died, and you're left with millions. But typically, if you were a woman in that time and your husband had died, it depends on what financial status your husband died in, to determine how well off you could live. But remarrying is, women were trained that you are a wife and you are a mother, and that is your only purpose in society, basically. They were trained for that. So when Esther, we don't know the status of Esther's finances, her family's finances. We certainly understand the status of Edward and Esther's finances now, but we don't know if it was his father who depleted the funds. We don't know if maybe Esther's mom was the one with the money and Edward's dad was not. We don't know that information. I would love to get that backstory. So Justin Young and Paula Byrne and Andrew Davies, and I really need to learn the other writers' names because we have a great group of writers. I don't know all of your names. I will learn them. I don't know them yet, but I know that you are all fantastically talented because this writing is a team effort and this show is amazing. And the writing is just wow. But if you guys want to write their background story, I would appreciate that. I would buy that book. I absolutely would buy that book. Paula, that seems right up your alley. But we don't know who depleted what. We don't know who was the one who was worse off in that marriage. But we do know that Esther had to pack up her things and come to where Edward's father was. Because even if Esther's mom had the money and Edward's dad did not, once she married, like they had said in the show, once you got married, it was the man who took over all the finances. That money now became his. Which is just incredibly sad way of things, but that is how it worked. And so she would have to go to him. He wouldn't. The man would not move to her house unless she lived in a palace and he lived in the poor side of London or of England. But typically the woman would go to the man's estate. So that is my understanding of what happened here, just based on the thing Esther says. You remember when she was walking with Charlotte on the beach and she says, I think overall you will regret ever having stepped foot in Sanditon. I know I have. And so my understanding of that line is that her mother and herself uprooted their life to come to Sanditon to live with Edward and his father. That is my understanding of what happened. Again, we don't know how long they've been there. We know the Denhams have been there for a long time, but we don't know how long Esther was there. We don't know how old she was when they got married, remarried, nothing. So when we first see them, she mirrors him, and Edward, I think, I don't know if it's so much that he likes corrupting people or he likes the chase of trying to corrupt someone, because is he ever really successful of corrupting anyone? At least not in this show. Clara, I think he kind of took credit for her corruption, but And again, I don't think Claire was corrupt either. I think Clara was a survivor and had to be. And the things she did, though wrong, though not the right way to do things, were how she was trained by the society she lived in to survive, because where she came from was so dark and it was so aggressive and it was so abusive that was how she was trained. If you want to survive, this is the only option you have. So I think Edward took credit for her corruption, but I think she was already a little out there when she came. Well, I know she was. So I think Edward kind of liked the challenge of seeing how many women he could get under their skin. He could get them to be loyal to him and kind of serve him, because that's certainly what he did with Esther, right? Esther was so loyal to him. It wasn't until Babington came along that she started to see the cracks in Edward, that she started to see that maybe he's not who I thought he was. Maybe he is more sinister than I ever gave him credit for. But in the beginning, when we first see them, they mirror each other because they have been each other's companion for so long. Their parents are dead. Lady Denham is not really their biggest fans, at least not at first of Esther's. I think she's always had kind of an admiration for Esther because, as she says in a later episode, Esther is a lot like her. And you can see that already in the way they talk, right? Lady Denham is very, very speaks her mind. She's very certain of herself. The only difference between Esther and Lady Denham, I think, is Esther doesn't want to control anything around her or everyone around her. Esther is just concerned about her bubble and her life and not being around the people she doesn't like. Because even with Clara, the only reason she aligns herself with Clara so much is because Clara is competing for what she's competing for on multiple levels. But overall, she's just concerned that she and Edward are going to make it through this. She and Edward are going to get the money to live again. Because I don't think they're really living right now. I think they're kind of at a standstill. So that's the only difference. But the way they speak, the way they interact with people, the way they just kind of hold themselves, they're very similar. And I would imagine that Lady Denham was much like Esther when she was a girl, when she was a woman. I imagine Lady Denham is exactly Esther. The difference is that Lady Denham did not marry for love, where Esther did. So I think Esther will turn out differently because I think that love from Babington will change her. Lady Denham didn't have that, so she just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when her husband died, she had no one around her. So the only way she could have people around her in her loneliness is to control them. Is like with Tom, she uses money. With Esther and Edward, she uses money. And I think even though she doesn't like Edward, and even though she's not really around Esther, or doesn't really show appreciation for Esther, I think she wants them around because they're people that can be around. I think that's why because if you think about her, I'm going off on a Lady Denham tangent. Maybe I should have just made this a Denham podcast. Last thing I'll say about Lady Denham, if you think about her taking in Clara, that doesn't really match with her personality as we see it. She took her in because she's lonely. And it's the same reason that she talks to Tom the way she does, why she tries to control everyone around her. Because if she's controlling them, she has a reason to demand their attention, right? So anyway, we see Edward is clearly intrigued by this beautiful newcomer who Charlotte just reeks of innocence. She reeks of virgin morality, right? And Esther is obviously annoyed with it the moment he notices her, right? And she doesn't say anything. He is the head of their household. And though they don't act like a married couple, because Edward doesn't, she gives the authority to him. She backs away for him to take the front, as if a wife would do for a husband. Because I genuinely think that's where Esther believes this is going. That's what Edward has told her all these years. That's how Edward has groomed her. And make no mistake, Edward groomed her. Make no mistake. I know that she's an adult now, but again, we don't know how long they were together. But based on her loyalty to him, based on her subservience to him, based on her, she does serve him. And based on how they interact with each other, you have to imagine that they have been together for a very long time, that this was built up. Because when she first came there, Edward is an attractive guy. Jack Fox is a good-looking dude. And you have to imagine that he was probably good-looking in his youth as well. So here's this young girl who just lost, or however old she is. Esther's not old in the show, so she's young at any point. she comes to this town where she just lost her father. She's sad. And then she ends up living with this attractive master manipulator who is not related to her by blood, who shows an interest in her. So you have to imagine that was built up over time. And Edward is very good at what he does. Charlotte's just too smart for him, in my opinion. I think one of the reasons I can love Esther or Edward so much is because he's not smart in the ways that matter. I mean, he's not Jack Fox's, but Edward Denham, not smart in the ways that matter. He does believe that he is smarter than everybody else, especially Lady Denham. He thinks that he's constantly pulling one over on her. He thinks he's constantly got a leg up on the Clara. He thinks he's got Esther in his pocket. She will do whatever he says, no matter what it is. So he's kind of riding high by the time we see him on himself. And so that kind of endears me to him. That okay, well, you're kind of stupid, so I can rationalize a little bit more. And again, we don't know what his father was like. We don't know if his father is responsible for how he is either. So these are all things I tell myself to justify liking Edward Denham as much as I like Edward Denham. When really, it's purely just Jack Fox's fault that I like Edward Denham so much. So if he wasn't so charming, and if he didn't play the character so fun, then I wouldn't like him. So I was watching an interview with an actor, and he was talking about a role he had played. It was based on a true story, so he was playing a real person, and the person he happened to be playing was someone who was really unlikable. It was a cult leader, and there was a lot of terrible things that this guy did, and when you watch the show, you really like the guy. Not really like him, but you're conflicted about how you feel. I'm like, I know he's bad, I don't like him, but why do I feel sympathy for him? And this actor had said, if I don't make you like this character a little bit, if I don't make you connect with this character, and if I don't get you to at least be conflicted, then I'm not doing my job. And that's exactly what Jack Fox does with Edward. Like, Edward's not a good dude. He's genuinely not a good dude. You look at all the things he did, the way he has manipulated Esther, the way he has groomed Esther, the way he uses physical touch to control Esther, the way he's holding her hostage essentially, and she doesn't know it. He's a typical abuser and a manipulator and a narcissist, and the things he does to Clara really, really terrible. The things he does to Lady Denham really terrible. Like, he is not a good guy. But you really want to love Edward Denham. Like, I watch this show, and whenever he's on the screen, I'm like, yes! Oh, wait, that's not supposed to be my reaction. So, I've just talked about them so separately. I had not talked about them together very much. But you see her react to him reacting to Charlotte. And then when they're walking along the cliffside, she makes mention of, basically, you found a new plaything. And Edward doesn't even try to disguise it. Because that when he says with a smirk, just getting to know her, or whatever, I can't remember his exact words, but he's smirking as he justifies how he's treating this girl, knowing that Esther knows exactly what he's doing. Because Edward feels he can do whatever he wants and get away with it because Esther is so loyal, and Esther loves him so deeply that she will always be in his pocket. And I think that's how he groomed her. He groomed her that way intentionally. And you can kind of see that in the scene where they're talking about marriage, right? It's when Esther is on the floor and he's on the couch and she's begging him to just run away. And he's like, we don't have money. And then he says, soon I will have to find a wife and you a husband. And I think, at first I was confused why he would be pushing that marriage angle when he's fought so hard to keep Edward connected to him, loyal to him, servant to him. And if she's got a husband, that's likely not going to happen. But I think that the reason he was doing that is because if he can maintain her loving him the way she does in the beginning of the show and convince her to marry for money, then there will be a ready supply of money for him from her husband and her. And then if he can also marry for money, there'll be a ready supply for the woman he's going to marry. On top of the fact he thinks he's going to get this inheritance. So he sees marriage as bringing him wealth from 3 different angles. And so I think he always has an intention to keep Esther in his pocket. Always. Even after she's married. Even after Edward can sleep around. He doesn't care. So after she's married, he intends to still keep Esther in his pocket. He intends to keep her as his puppet and his plaything. I don't think he will ever have an intimate physical relationship with Esther. I think he will only pull that out to control her. And I think the reason he does it that way is because Esther does have a moral code. Esther is decent and Esther is good. Esther's confused and controlled, but she's good and she's decent. And I think that Edward is very conscious of the personalities of the girls that he likes to corrupt, and he prefers to corrupt the good ones. But now with Esther, I don't think he's bored with her because he's had her for so long. But I do, I think he is a little bit. But I think it's more so that he's aware of who she is, of how she operates, of where her heart is, of where her moral compass is. And he can't do anything too out there to convince her that he's not the great catch that she believes he is. And if he can use, well, we can't have this kind of relationship because we're not married, and after she's married, well, we can't have this kind of relationship because we are married to other people. I think he believes he'll be able to keep her a little longer by displaying these dishonest moments of good, right? So I think that he would never have that kind of relationship with Esther, but I think he for certain always intended to keep her loyal to him and nobody else. Marrying a husband for her would just be money for Edward, I think is how he views it. Because I think he genuinely views Esther as his. She belongs to him. She's his property. No matter who she marries, she will remain his property. I think that's how Edward views Esther, which is a shame because Esther has so much to bring to the table, and that's why I love what Babington does for her. And Babington is my favorite guy in the show. Babington and Esther are my two favorite characters. Although Arthur is pretty high up on my list too. And I love what Sidney brings to the table because of he's Sidney Parker, right? He's brooding, he's beautiful, he's altered by love, and you have him and Charlotte as the protagonists, and you love them because they're Charlotte and Sidney. And you want that relationship because it's Charlotte and Sidney. They're the leads, they're the heads, they're the heroes of the show. But Esther and Babington are the glorious side characters that bring more good to Sanditon than others do. I mean, Babington's bringing his money in there. Esther is caring for Lady Denham, who is the matriarch of the town. Babington, I think it often gets overlooked what Esther and Babington bring to Sanditon. And I will have a day where I focus on them. It's one of the next 3 coming up. But I can't let myself talk about them too much now because I will go on and on and on. So Babington's the first one to understand what Esther can bring to the table. Edward, I don't think it's that he's unable to see it. I think it's that he's so shallow and he's so self-centered that he just doesn't care to see it. He doesn't care anything about who Esther is, what she wants, as long as what she wants is him. I don't think he cares, and he doesn't make any other effort. So it's not that he's unable, it's a choice to only be concerned about himself and how things affect him, who affects him, who's going to give him a benefit, who's going to give him something, who's going to be worth his time because he's going to get something from them. That's how Edward's mind works, and I really truly think that is the only way his mind works. That's all he cares about. But Esther, I think the most telling thing with Esther is when and I've talked about this before in the recap of episode 1, but the most telling thing about her is when she is on that beach with Charlotte, and it's after their walk. And first of all, I love that she runs into Mary and Charlotte. It's like, can I persuade one of you to join me? And Mary says, I can't, but Charlotte can. And Esther speed walks away. And Charlotte almost has to run to keep up with her because it was almost like she was trying to take flight. Like, she's so claustrophobic in that town because I don't think she realizes it, but I think Edward is the source of it. She doesn't know that because she's so blinded by her devotion to him. She's so blinded by her love for him in the beginning that she doesn't realize it's Edward that's making Sanditon so horrible. It's Edward that's altering her perception to be so jaded and to be so negative. And honestly, he's keeping her in these poor conditions. When she first was proposed to by Babington, Edward convinced her to say no to him. She could have been out of these poor conditions with leaky roofs and dark, dingy hallways and an angry, selfish man. She could have been in a lord's manor, in his house, with his money and with his availabilities and his comforts and his security and his love, actual love, decent love from an amazing guy. She could have had all that. Edward is the one keeping her boxed in these dire circumstances. And so while she doesn't attribute the blame to Edward, he is the reason she's so claustrophobic there. He is the reason she feels there's no hope there, and it's dingy and it's a dark place. It's because of Edward. But she's so loyal to him and she's so devoted to him that she can't really make that connection. And so when she's on the beach with Charlotte and she says, I used to know this line by heart, but it's been a while since I did a rewatch. I've got another podcast and this one and a whole bunch of other things. So it's been a while. I need to rewatch it. But you'd think that, 15 times was enough. She says something along the lines of, when they're looking out at the sea, and she says, isn't it impossibly dreary? And Charlotte sees the complete opposite. Like, she sees it as beautiful. And where Charlotte sees the sea as boxing her in, and she can't possibly leave because all she sees is sea. Charlotte sees freedom on the sea. She sees open, we can go anywhere from the sea. But Esther sees the opposite. And it's because of Edward. And it's how he's made her feel about herself. Because I think Esther's a very, very strong woman, right? And Edward has trained her almost to trust no one but him. And so when she's talking to Charlotte, she says that, but she also says, I think you will regret ever stepping foot in Sanditon. Sanditon's a terrible place. The people here suck. The people you're aligned with have problems. And she even in that, like, it was exactly because I've heard people say, that Esther's not kind because of the things she said about the Parkers, but it's exactly what Charlotte said about the Parkers. Only more black and white. And the words she used were more harsh, but it was the same thing Charlotte said. So I don't think we can fault Esther for that, because Esther sees people mostly clearly. She sees people clearly, but there's a negative bent on everything she says, everything she views. It's like she's got glasses on, but the glasses have a film that's negativity, or a film that is there's a certain word I'm looking for. I can't think of what the word is, but it's like there's something on there it's a negative film, and that's everything gets filtered through that negative film. And then by the time it reaches her, she sees what it is, but she sees it a little twisted. She sees it negatively rather than as it actually is. It can't even be normal. It's got a little bit more of a negative turn to it, a negative bent to it by the time it reaches Esther. So she does see the Parkers clearly. She understands what's happening there. But even with Mary, when she says, nothing's wrong with Mary, but I feel sorry for her because she settled with him, basically. And again, I'm going to paraphrase everything I say that they say. So she, even with that, like, she acknowledges she likes Mary, but she can't even stay solidly positive about it. So Esther has been, I don't think Edward tried to make her that way, but I think Edward would whisper in her ear about all the bad things, about all the bad people, why they were bad, how they were bad, and the town. I don't think his goal was to make her a mean person or an angry person. I think his goal was to say, see, I'm the only one you can trust. I'm the only one who's really going to love you and really going to, give you what you want and deserve. I think that was his goal in that. And though we don't see that, and though that's just an assumption on my part, based on their relationship and how they interact with each other, I think that's what happened. And I'm always right about these things. Never ever wrong. So can't possibly be wrong here. So we have that aspect of her personality because of Edward. And it's interesting to me when Esther's starting to slip away how Edward reacts. Because there's times when it's like with Babington. Edward sees that Babington is going to offer her more than he can. And I truly don't think I truly don't think that he's sad to lose that relationship. And I don't think that's why he stops from dating Babington. I think it's because I'm losing my other money source. If she marries a guy, that is my money. I really think that's how Edward views it. So having her marry Babington, and it's a love match, and Babington is not a stupid guy. Babington is not unobservant. I think what Edward's hoping for is marry an old guy who has a boatload of money, and then he'll die, and then you and I can have all of that money to ourselves. I think that's what he's hoping for. So that's what Babington's marriage represents to him is, I'm never going to get that money. He's too young, and he actually loves her. I'm never going to touch that money. So I think that's why he fights it, and that's why he notices it so much. But in other moments, like that scene where she's on her knees and he's on the couch and she's begging him to get married or begging him to run away, he's completely oblivious. Because as long as her eyes are on him, Edward doesn't care anything about Esther. I wish they weren't both E names. It's very difficult for me. It helps if you're smarter than I am, but I'm not. So, but with all those moments when Esther is truly trying to convey her pain at them not being able to live together, and she even says at one point, it's when they're walking on the beach on their way to Lady Denham's, because Lady Denham has summoned them. She says, and how long are we to keep living this half-life? He doesn't care about that. He doesn't care. And what he says there of, we can travel the streets of Venice and Rome and go out of these different places and anything your heart desires, sister. I think it was just, if I say enough flowery things to her, she can stop freaking out. If I say enough things about if I can tell her, hey, I think about our future, then she'll be okay again. And she won't be mad, and she'll just let me do what I have to do. I think it's all smoke and mirrors for Edward. I think Edward certainly plans on taking that trip. And I do think he plans on taking Esther with him. I also think he plans on using Esther's money. I don't think he actually because the way he's discussing it, you have to think that when they get Lady Denham's money, is he really going to share any of that with Esther? Is he really going to ensure that Esther gets her fair share? No, he's not. He's going to keep Esther with him, and he's going to use all the money himself. But I think that Edward is smart enough to understand, just smart enough to understand, that the things he wants are very expensive. He wants the lifestyle of a lord without actually doing any of the work. So I think that he does plan on using Lady Denham's money, but I think his other plan is also to use whatever money Esther brings him with the marriage. He's not saying this at this point, but I think that's his plan, because if he's planning on taking Esther with him, that's the only reason he'd take her with him, is because he's using her money. But he certainly doesn't plan on being with her or intimate with her. He plans on, I assume, finding women all along the way, because that's just Edward's personality. It's really easy to talk bad about him when I'm not looking at Jack Fox's face. Or his smirk. And I don't mean that like, oh, I'm swooning over you, Jack. I don't mean that. I just mean the way he portrays Edward. Like, that's why I used to love the smirk that he often has, and the one line where, and it gets me every time. I laugh so hard every time I hear it. When they're sitting it was when Lady Denham summoned them, and it was Esther and Edward and Clara and Lady Denham sitting in Lady Denham's, I don't know if it was I think it was a drawing room. And Clara says, I rather thought you would prefer, or no measure up to Edward. Something along those lines. And Edward says, it's a fair question, I'll grant you. I laugh every single time. It's so funny. And I want to know how much of Edward's lines were ad-libbed, because Jack Fox has that same personality. He's not a narcissist, and he's not a jerk, and he's not a controlling manipulator, but I just mean the sarcasm and the wit is very much up Jack Fox's alley. So I wonder how much of Edward's lines were ad-libbed, and how much of his facial expressions and his dances and his movements, how much of that was ad-libbed and how much of that was scripted or directed. I'm very curious to know that. But it's easier to disparage him, but I'm not looking at the smirk or listening to his sarcastic commentary. So there's all these moments where Esther is convinced he really loves her and really cares for her, because the words he's saying, just the words themselves, would convey that. But if you look at the tone if you look at his body language, if you look at even like what I mean by the tone is how he says things, almost like he's trying to sell her something, right? When he's talking about going to the streets of Venice, and I don't remember all the places he said. Seriously, I need to rewatch. He's being a showman like Thomas. He's got the big arms, and he's displaying things up here, right? He's got this voice that's just, yes, we'll do this and anything your heart desires, sister. Like, it's almost like a circus, a ringleader in the circus, or a showman, you know. That's what he's doing. He's selling her things, but she doesn't hear that or see that, what she's grasping onto, because, I mean, does she really have another choice at this point? She loves him so much that she doesn't have another choice at this point. She can only hear the words that he's saying to her. That's all she can do, because I think that she is so desperate for love and affection, because, again, remember, the reason she feels so claustrophobic, this is all from my perspective. This is not gospel truth. It's just how I've perceived the show and how I perceive the characters. But Edward Denham is the reason she's so lonely. Edward Denham is the reason she's so claustrophobic. Edward Denham is the reason that she hates Sanditon so much, even though she doesn't notice it. So Edward has ensured that she has nobody. He is, even from Lady Denham, he has poisoned that relationship. He has poisoned the relationship with Clara. I don't think he attempts to poison Charlotte's relationship with Esther, but they don't really have one because they're so preoccupied with other things. But he certainly poisons her relationship with Babington. He cuts her off from anybody that could give her any relief or any sense of fellowship or belonging. Esther is so lonely and so desperate for affection, for love, for something that moves her aching heart, that heals her aching heart. That when Edward says these words, or these pretty, flowery, flowing words of how much he loves her and how much he's going to devote to her and how much they're just going to have everything their heart desires, those words alone, it's all she can do to just cling to those. Because that's what she needs. She needs someone to care about her desires and her needs and her wants. And I don't think she's ever had that outside of her parents, maybe. And Babington, obviously. But prior to Babington going there, that has been absent from her life for so long. And how sad is it to think about that? Wonderful, amazing Esther, feeling that way, going through those things, all alone, because Edward has never cared about her. She is alone. Even though Edward's presence is there, she's alone. And so this dynamic between them it's constantly back and forth. And she's got to be so tired of the back and forth. And she's got to be so confused. And that part of it, I think, is maybe Edward keeping her a little confused, because she has to be confused by his, at times, I don't care about you, and you're going to have to find a husband, I'm going to have to find a wife. And that's fine. That's cool. To, no, I can give you what you need. I mean, he's so back and forth with those things, depending on how he sees her slipping away, or if he sees her drawing closer. When she's drawing closer, there's no need to flatter her. There's no need to tell her, I need you, I want you, we're going to be together. But as she's slipping away, then he's like, oh, no, come back here because I need you, I want you, I love you. So that back and forth has got to be so hard to wrap your mind around, especially when he spent, I presume, years grooming her, getting her to this point of devotion and loyalty and exclusivity. And it's just really sad to think about that. And there's a time when, it was during episode 5, during the cricket, when Esther walked off with Babington, and you see Edward in the tent, and he kind of makes this face of like, Babington, kind of, he doesn't say anything, obviously, but he's got a really nice scowl grimace going on his face. I don't mean nice like, oh, I mean nice like, he does grimace scowl very well. And he's mad that she's walking off with Babington. And again, it's not because he loves Esther. It's not because he covets Esther's love. It's because Esther is a source of means for him. She's currency. And he cannot stand the idea of anyone else taking his currency away, because Edward is all about Edward. And currency brings notoriety. Currency brings wealth and pleasures and laziness and lethargy. That's what currency brings to Edward. He can do whatever he wants, however he wants, and have no worries and no qualms. And my prediction would be that if if Babington didn't come in and Esther did marry someone who had money, Esther would use up, or Esther, I really just mixed their names. Edward would use up all of Esther's money. And she'd be done with. He would push her aside. It's when she would no longer have anything to offer him, no longer anything to give him, she would become useless. I think Edward would run her into the poorhouse. And then say, all right, see you later. We're all done now. This thing we have, we're done. And I really think that that's the trajectory that the relationship would take. So I love that Babington came along and saved her from that, obviously. But their relationship at times appears like Edward cares about her. And I think that's obviously by design. And I think that's, I don't even think that's for the watchers, the viewers' benefit. I think it's for the character benefit. For there to be a reason why Esther is still clinging to Edward with such tenacity. I think that they have to write it that way because Esther is too smart. Esther, I need to stop mixing their names. Esther is not only too smart, but she's too good to just blindly follow Edward. There has to be more substance to why she's following him. And that's why I think that it had been years of grooming, years of manipulation, years of mental abuse that Edward inflicted on Esther in order to get her to be devoted to him the way she is. In order to get her to so completely cut off anyone else and not even, it's to the point that she almost, like even with Charlotte, she doesn't even really desire a friendship with Charlotte. And Charlotte's not after anything she wants. But Edward, oh my gosh, Edward has convinced her that the only person worth having in her life, is him. Why do you need anybody else when you have me? And I think that because of the way Esther was written to be incredibly smart and intuitive and bold, I think the only way that she would be given herself over to Edward so completely is if it had been years of manipulation and abuse and grooming. And I love when she starts to see the cracks in his armor. And I mean, obviously, when she begs him to get married and he says, we can't, or run away, he's like, we can't do that. Her pain has caused her to give him the silent treatment, because remember when Lady Denham comes over the house and she comes out of the room to Esther comes out of the room to grab a book, and Edward says, I've been wondering where you were. Are you sick? Or are you feeling unwell? And Esther doesn't say a word to him. She just turns to walk out because she's mad. She's hurt. But even then, she still stays. And Lady Denham comes over and starts talking about Babington and how he's coming to the cricket and all that sort of stuff. And Esther is so angry because, again, she has not given up on Edward. She's just mad at Edward right then. She's hurt by what Edward said right then. But I wonder how oftentimes that's happened before, where Edward has suggested something vaguely similar, obviously not as direct and cut to the quick, but I wonder how often he said something vaguely like that, where it has caused this kind of fight where I'm mad at you, I'm not going to talk to you for a day. I mean, it happens to my husband sometimes, and I sometimes, of, you're going to make me mad, I'm just not going to say anything. Sometimes it's wiser to not say anything in your anger, but you have to wonder how many times that's happened, because right then she's not giving up Edward. She's not saying, I'll do anything but be with Edward. She's saying, I'm mad at you right now, and I can't talk to you, because when Lady Denham starts talking about Babington and how he's coming, she's mad that Babington is coming, because she doesn't think she wants Babington. She still thinks she wants Edward. And I think that is, when they're at the cricket match, I think is actually the first time that she starts to see things differently, because she's fought Babington the whole way. Remember when Babington approached her on the street before he was leaving and he asked permission to write her? Edward very confidently leaves her alone with Babington, thinking there's no way she is going to give herself over to someone like him when she could have me. And I don't know where his bravado comes from, because, dude, you're broke. You live in a time where money is survival and you are flat broke. But that is how much time and energy he has put into grooming her, that he is so incredibly confident that a lord who has a significant amount of money is pursuing this girl. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to let you two talk. I'm going to go over here. You go ahead. You talk to my girl. And so he very confidently, very smugly walks away, and he comes back and he says, what's wrong with him? Knowing. And this is just, because he says it with a smirk. He knows. But it feeds his ego, and he likes to hear how devoted Esther is to him. And she says, there's nothing wrong with him, except for there's only one man in the world that I could ever feel that way towards. And they walk away, and Edward's head is a little higher, like, ha, I have more value than a lord, is kind of, where I imagine his head being at. So he's confident about it at first, but the more Babington pursues her, the more she starts to see what a real man is like, what a real decent man is like, and what love could actually feel like. Because I don't think by the end of episode 5, and even the end of episode 6, I don't think she loves him. I think she begins to love him at the end of episode 7. I think she begins to love him, certainly. But I think it's more the way he's making her feel than anything else. So with Edward, and when it starts to crack, is the more time Babington spends with her. There's that letter she receives, and Edward is reading it out loud, and he's mocking it. And he's saying how ridiculous it is. And she says, basically, do you really think I'm not good enough for a lord? She says, why is that so amusing that a man like that would want me? Why is that so amusing to you? And it's Edward's response, and he thinks about it for a beat. Edward's response is, and again, I'm paraphrasing, his response is basically, it's just the very idea that you could love someone like him. It's not that how could he not love you? It's that you could possibly love someone like him when you have me, is basically what Edward is saying there. Without saying it, that's what he's saying. And so, even that is a veiled insult to Esther. But because he says it in a praising way, and she's so craving, because she has none of that. There's not a single person in her life who will give her any sort of real affection or love. And she craves it. She craves good, kind words about herself. And so when Edward phrases it like a praise, she takes it at truth because she wants it so bad. And then at that cricket match, when Babington and Esther leave, and Babington starts telling her all these good things about her without any veiled message in it, and it's not gimmicky, it's not showman, it's not at an inopportune time, it's just Babington telling her how great she is. And I think it's Babington being vulnerable, because how many times in Edward and Esther's interactions do we see Edward be any sort of vulnerable with Esther? We don't. Every time we see Edward and Esther, it's Edward trying to tell her what scheme they need to run next, what plan they need to do next, how they're going to get this money. It's always about money. Yes, I get that they don't have it, and money back then was survival. But never once does he talk to Esther unless it comes at an opportune time. Does he actually make it about him and Esther? Babington just lets everything down and shares things with Esther. And I think that was the turning moment for her. Because when she looks at him and says, I did not expect this, when he proposed, and he proposed in complete, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, he proposes in complete sincerity. He proposes by opening himself up to her and letting her see him. When he talks about artifice, when he talks about being real and authentic, and then he proposes to her, telling her that she's magnificent, that he's never met anyone like her, that she's just so, and he's spot on with Esther. She is magnificent. And when she says, she laughs at first, and she says, you can't be serious. And then he says, well, I am. And she just stares at him. And I think she stares at him in total surprise. She's being genuine. She says, I did not expect this. She's being genuine. And I think partly it's because Edward has been the one to define her worth for so long. But no matter what Edward has said to her, like when he said, oh, it's not that he couldn't love you, it's that how could you love him? I think, while it wasn't conscious, I think she did pick up on the underlying meaning of, he's not really going to be into you because you're you and he's him. He's a lord. Who are you? I think she did pick up on the underlying tone of his voice without even realizing she did it. So I don't think she ever really truly thought, and I think that's why she never thought Babington was going to propose to her, why Babington was never really going to be a serious suitor. But I think as she looks at him and she says so sadly, like she just realized that she made a grave mistake when she says, I did not expect this. I think part of her begins to run through all of her interactions with Edward. I think part of her begins to re-examine everything that she and Edward has gone through. And so by the time she gets back to Denham Place, excuse me, by the time she gets back to Denham Place, and Edward says, you were gone a long while. Yes, we went for a walk. Who were you with? You know who I was with. And then, of course, it starts off with, who won? And he says, doesn't matter. And she said, I thought winning was everything to you, Edward. And I really think that as she walked home after Babington proposed, that she truly, and that's why I think she truly began to re-examine every one of their interactions and who he is as a person. Because honestly, when Babington proposed to her in that way, what did she have to consider? Did she just have to consider Babington? No. She had to compare and contrast the two, because she had, on one hand, she had been convinced that there was no other person than Edward. And it doesn't even feel loving. It just feels like he was a necessity. He was her heir, is what it felt like, more than, I love this man. It was that he had become her source of living. And so she, on one hand, she had that, and on the other hand, she had this guy who made her feel things, who made her feel good about herself, who just made her feel good in general. And I mean, she even says to Edward, he makes me laugh. I forgot what that felt like. Babington brings levity and joy, which is something Edward has never even thought necessary for her. For him, yes. Everything to Edward is about having a good time. To him, Esther should only be concerned about serving him and making him feel good and happy. Why should he have to care about her? She belongs to him. That's it. So you have to imagine that on the way back from that walk with Babington, from the proposal, that she's comparing and contrasting the two, right? She's running through everything Babington has said versus everything Edward has said. She's running everything Babington has done versus everything Edward has done. The way they interact towards her, the way they relate to her, the way they move around her, because this is a big decision. Am I going to leave what I always thought was my everything, literally my everything? Or am I going to give that up to go to this man who makes me feel good? Or am I going to reject things that make me feel good for the first time to stay with the one who has always been my everything? So it's a big decision for her. She has to do that. So when she comes home, she's a little conflicted. And then when Edward says, who cares who won? That's the first time he's ever really said something like that. Because everything has been about winning to Edward. And even he says on that beach when they're walking to Lady Denham's after they've been summoned, it's right after, Arthur and Diana are on the horses. And she says, why is this a game to you? And he says, it is a game. So he's already acknowledged that. And then when she says, I thought winning was everything to you, Edward. It's bitter for the first time. She's speaking to him with absolute bitterness. And that's why. Because she has finally started to see the chinks in his armor. But she hasn't completely severed that. I mean, it's been years. It's going to take more than one afternoon to sever that. Right? So, this is the moment where I truly, truly, truly don't like Edward Denham. And he says, I can do so much more than make you laugh. And kisses her for, I believe, the first time. I mean, I'm sure it was like a little peck here and there, but this was a real kiss. And he knows that, so he withholds that physical attention, which, by the way, even babies need physical attention. Like, that's why when babies are born, why they encourage, laying on the chest, because it's actually a physical need for people to have physical attention. And Edward withholds that from Esther until certain moments to get what he needs from her. And that's exactly what he does here. And he's so smart in a really terrible way about this. And when he kisses her, he knows, okay, she's back with me. She's not going to say yes to him. She's mine now. Because he knows what she craves, and he knows that Babington won't abuse her or manipulate her like that. So Edward's going to manipulate her. And that smirk on his face when he hugs her after he kisses her, I just want to smack him right in the mouth. I want to do more than smack him. I want to punch him right in the face. Maybe in the throat. Not sure which. But then when she goes outside to Babington, when he comes up, she does not want to tell him no. I mean, it's written all over her face. And maybe that was a Charlotte Spencer decision rather than a writer's decision. But that doesn't matter. It's written all over her face. She does not want to say no to Babington. And I think the reason is because when Edward kissed her, her obligation kicked in, but she also kind of felt, how can I leave something that has always been my everything for an unknown? And I think that kiss made her fearful. I think that kiss made her leery of going through this again with anybody else, because Edward has really been the only guy she's had an interaction with other than her father and his father. Edward's been the only peer that she has had, and I don't mean like peer of the realm, I mean peers in same age or same age grouping. Edward has been the only one who she has gotten any information to about what men are like. Can she really go through that again? Can she really suffer with a man she doesn't know and live the way she lives now, but with someone she doesn't know? Because I have to assume that some part of her thinks that all men are like Edward, because that's what she's known. But I think she's more comfortable staying with Edward because she's been with him for so long and thinks that she knows him so well and thinks that she's already put in so much time and effort. And I think that with Babington, she has been convinced that, you say these things, but it won't really work. And the other key thing there, too, that I think that needs to be addressed is when she says, us together would be absurd. I don't think that's an insult to Babington. I think Edward kissing her and the way she felt about it was something that filled her with so much shame, that what she was actually saying to Babington was, I'm not worthy of being with you. Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm nothing. And I have no worth. That made me really emotional. And I really think that's what she was saying to Babington, but Babington didn't hear that. Babington heard, I will never be enough for you, will I? Because she is filled with so much dread of having to tell him no. I'm getting really emotional. I need an Edward joke, a Jack Fox joke to make me not emotional about this. And then when he walks away, it's the first time she actually lets her eyes linger on him. She watches him walk away. And that sort of confirms for her that she doesn't deserve any better than Edward. It's just a guy walking away from her. And then when she has to tell Lady Denham that she told him no, which is funny because she doesn't actually have to tell him that, but I'm sure that Lady Denham summoned her over there to find out the results of it. But it's in episode 6 when they're all sitting around the bed, and Edward says, "Can we fetch you a priest or your solicitor?" The look on Esther's face, because I think that kiss, I don't think that, I'm kind of rethinking my statement on what that kiss did just a little bit. Most of it I still stand by, but with that kiss, I don't think it reinforced how much she wanted Edward. I think it reinforced how worthless she was, that she could be swayed so easily by that she could feel, because women weren't really taught about sex or emotions, or not emotions, about physical feelings. And I think that her reaction to that kiss shamed her, but I think it also made her disgusted with Edward a little bit. I think that was the start of it. Because she's got the two examples side by side of Babington and Edward. There's no way that any person who is as smart as Esther is going to see the value in Edward over Babington. There's no way. So the fact that she succumbed to his physical attentions, I think really upset her. It really bothered her. It made her feel shame and worthless. And it started to change how she views Edward. Like, I think she was starting to see him as a little disgusting. And then when he asked that question, the look on her face was, she actually went and like looked at him. Like, if you're listening on Podbean, you can't see my face. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my face. But she just looks at him with disgust. And, are you insane? That's what you're concerned about right now? A woman is in front of us dying, and you are concerned with getting her to change her will to benefit you while this woman lays here dying? And we talked about this in last week's episode, on the recap of episode 6. If Edward had been the one to see her instead of Esther, there's not a chance he would let her live. There's not a chance he would have even tried to help her. But Esther is so good. At her core, she's so good. And not even just at her core. On the surface, she is so good. She genuinely cares whether people live or die. Edward does not. And it was that moment that solidified that all Edward cares about is Edward. And I think she starts to question his allegiance to her at that moment. And then when he's walking through the house looking for the will, being an insane person, she says, well, let me help. And he says, no, you go tell the town about our aunt. They want to know. Go tell her. And I think she was convinced a little bit by Edward that, again, it's his words, because she craves it. And she's just turned down Babington, which I think she views as her only other shot out. And she's just said no to it. So now she realizes, well, Edward's it for me. So when he says, because she even says, she's dying, and this is all you care about. Like, she confronts him about it. He says, no, it's for us. It's about our future. It's for you and it's for me. It's my desire to take care of you, which is a complete lie, obviously. But again, Esther craves those words so much, and she's just turned away the authentic version of that. She needs Edward's words to be true. She needs them to be true. And I think she knows she's grasping at straws a little bit to stand by there and believe him in that. And so that's what she said. All right, how can I help? Where should I look? And when Clara confronts her about what and I think Clara's was twofold. When she told Esther about Edward and her, I think part of it was to set Esther off, because Clara's smart enough to figure it out. Clara is very, very watchful, and she is very good at understanding intentions. And so she was obviously aware, and obviously it's displayed several times on the show, she was obviously aware that there was some sort of relationship between Esther and Edward. But I think she was also aware that it was one-sided, except for one-sided in that only one of them loved the other one. Not one-sided in that Edward didn't want Esther, but Esther, I think she understood that Edward was not a good dude, and Edward was very much like most of the men Clara had met in her life. So I think her confronting Esther was twofold. I think it was getting her to leave Edward, because maybe then Clara would have a chance with Edward, and the money could be shared between Edward and Clara. But also, I think part of it was saving Esther a little bit. Do you think so? I think, and I've said this before, I think that Clara is not bad. I think Clara has been trained and taught through sexual abuse, through mental abuse, through physical abuse, through her life circumstances, her entire life, that she has to do this to survive. That she's not wholly bad. She's just a survivor of her circumstances and the time that she lives in. I think that there is a part of her that truly likes, and I think when she says to Esther, we should not be enemies, she really genuinely means it. So I think that I think that was her first goal when she confronted Esther about that, but I think it was also to save Esther from Edward a little bit. The money probably outweighed the rest, but I do think that getting Esther away from Edward, giving her relief, had a little something to do with it. I think Clara could spot an abuser a mile away. And I think Clara understood that Edward was definitely abusing Esther. So I think it was twofold. And so when she finds that out, that's it for Esther. I think she might have even stayed with him, possibly, because I don't think she saw herself as having another choice. And I don't know that she would have ever fully come out and said to him, I know what you've done. I think she would just continue to be acidic and curt and despising him the rest of their life. Because even when he wakes up, she says, he's complaining about laying on the couch, and she says, perhaps you would have been more comfortable on the floor. It doesn't say anything else. Of course, they're interrupted then, but still. And Esther has already explained all this to Lady Denham when she thought she was in an incoherent coma or incoherent sleep, whatever. And when Edward comes in the room and Lady Denham turns them away, says, get out. You parasite, get out. What a perfect way to describe Edward Denham, huh? A parasite. And Esther is completely shell-shocked. I don't think she ever intended to cut Edward out, and then he was cut out for her. And I think what you're seeing on her face, there's a little bit of fear that her source of living, her source of life, even though she now despises him, has been taken away. I mean, you know how it is true that victims of physical abuse from a significant other, typically, or it's very common, I should say, for them to go back to that abuser. And for us who are not being abused, our thought is, why would you go back to them? Why? But for them, it's really hard to break out of that cycle. And I think that's true of Esther. And so when Lady Denham turned him out of the house, it was equal parts, am I free? And equal parts, you're taking him away. What am I going to do now? And Edward still hasn't claimed her. He still thinks, after everything Lady Denham has disclosed, in front, like, obviously Esther already knew because she says the floor comment to him, but Edward didn't pick up on that. He didn't understand that. And then when Lady Denham says all these things, Edward and Esther are both in the room. Like, they're both in there. So clearly Edward is aware now that Esther knows everything he's done. And he's still, all he was able to focus on was Esther is now the one who inherits everything. He was so consumed with that because he had built this loyalty, and that was always his end game, is that whatever money Esther had was going to be his money because he's built up this loyalty in her and the servanthood in her. And so that's all he focused on, because he genuinely didn't care about Esther or her feelings or what she needed or what was good for her. He cared about nothing of that. So he wasn't even focusing on the fact that this horrible thing he did was just disclosed in front of Esther, and she now knows. He didn't care. Because in his mind, it shouldn't affect her because she still loves me. She's going to give me everything I want. This is great news. So his confusion was real when she said, there is no us. There's nothing. You destroyed that. He's so confused by her reaction. Like, I don't understand why you'd be upset. Because you're the most self-centered person in the world. And even when he comes in the end, and he's in the final dance scene that, oh my gosh, Edward Denham. Him, I love Rob Jarvis. Love that guy. I did it. He was my very first interview I did for Sanditon Chronicles. And I love talking with him. I think he's awesome. I think he's funny. But I am so mad at his character. Old Stringer and Edward Denham ruined everything. So when Edward comes in there and he's confessing his love to Esther, and he's saying, you know, you love me as I love you. I know you do. And I think his goal there is because he's realized too late that what she wanted all along was a confession of love from him, was affection, was real affection. And I think he thinks, if I just tell her I love her, she's going to feel that I love her and she's going to take me back. And I think when he says to her, only if she tells me to go, I think he truly does not believe she's going to tell him to leave. And I know that that's not an uncommon belief to have of this scene, but he genuinely doesn't think she's going to tell him to go, because he genuinely thinks, as he did after Lady Denham disclosed what he did in front of Esther, that there's nothing that will turn him away from him, because he has worked so hard and so long to get her as devoted to him as she was. And so when she tells him to leave, he realizes the consequences of what he's done. And I don't think it's like, oh man, I lost Esther. I think it's, he just realized that he was playing the wrong angle the whole time in that moment. I think that's why his face fell. And the reason he came blazing in there was because he, lost Esther, who was going to be his pocketbook. And he lost Lady Denham's inheritance because it went to Esther. So not only was Esther going to get money from whoever she married, this is what Edward's thinking. Not only is she going to get money from the man she's going to marry, but she's also going to get my aunt's money, and that's 2 incomes right there. I need that income back because now I've been disgraced and I've been thrown out of my family's home, and there's no way I can make a marriage that's going to give me money, so I need Esther back. And when he says, she'll break your heart too, just like she broke mine, or whatever, however he says that, for him, what Edward is actually saying there is she broke his heart by taking away all his opportunities for all that money. That's what he's saying. It's nothing to do with love, because Edward doesn't love. I don't even think the man knows how to love, which could stem from his family, could stem from his father. I don't know. Whatever the cause is, he does not understand how to love anybody other than himself. I don't even think he does a great job of that. So that he's not saying he loves her. He's not saying she broke my heart because I loved her so much and she rejected me. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I needed her because she was going to bring me money and she rejected me, so she took away my money, and now I don't have what I love most, which is money and myself. And it takes Babington at the end of episode 7. Oh my gosh, that scene. Just, whoo. You can't, if you're listening on Podbean, you can't see it, but I am definitely tearing up. Because what Babington says to her is so amazing. And that's what Esther really needed to hear. That's what she's been craving, and he said it with complete vulnerability, with complete transparency, and I love that he says, with no intentions. I come here with no intentions other than being your friend. No one has ever said that to her, and no one has ever been that for her outside of Charlotte. And he says, I don't know what is and I'm going to get it wrong, but so I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to try to paraphrase. He says, I don't know what's transpired here, but I know that he has abused you in the most pernicious way. And to have someone confirm that in her, that it wasn't her fault that all these things happened, that it was him. Edward has destroyed her by what he's done to her. And it's not her defect, but it's Edward's defect. I think her crying right there so openly to him was because she had never been told that way. But I think Esther has hated herself a little bit the entire time in Sanditon. I think she hated herself a little bit because of what Edward made her feel. And I don't think it was so much, I think that she just thought she hated herself, but I think it was more that she hated the way she felt all the time because of Edward. And so for Babington to say that is just, the relief I felt for Esther right there, the sorrow I felt for Esther right there, the empathy I felt for her was so intense. That scene was so well done, and Charlotte Spencer, a masterclass. And then in that scene in episode 8, when Babington proposes to her, and he says, I don't care what people will think. Can't you see that I love you? That's never been what she understood love to be, not ever. And she says, what is that to me since I do not love you? He says, I don't care. I don't need your servitude. I don't need your loyalty and because that's what she's saying at first, is I will not be your statue, because she's been that for so long and she's starting to see how much she doesn't want that. And Babington says, that's not what I want. I just want you because you are enough. The reason Esther gives in right there is because, and I think that she had been holding on a little bit from letting go of everything to let Babington in. But once he disclosed that and declared it out loud, the last vestiges of her armor fell, I think. And she truly became happy. That wedding and the morning after is such a heartwarming scene, because picture Edward or Esther in episode 1 in her black dress, her black hat, her severe face, no smile, no joy, no light. And then the day after her wedding, hair down, obviously she's not dressed, but hair down, the expression on her face. And this is a testament to how good Charlotte Spencer is at her job. But the look on her face is so light, and it's so joy-filled, and it's just peace. She radiates peace and joy. She never had that with Edward. and he made sure she didn't. So I think we've been pretty detailed with Edward and Esther. If you have anything to say about this, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, you can feel free to email me at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook under the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. You can find me on Twitter under, gotta remember, Sanditon the, or on Instagram under the.sanditon.chronicles. I would love to hear from you. I love hearing your feedback. I finally got around to answering all the feedback that you guys sent in. Thank you for that, by the way. Your feedback helps me to direct how this channel operates and what we bring to you. And if you're loving what we do, we'd like to know that. If you're not loving what we do, we want to know that too. Remember always to subscribe and share our podcast channel. You can do that on YouTube. And if you could also do it on Podbean, that'd be great. I know that we have some listeners who do both, who listen when they are doing whatever, when they're exercising or cooking or whatever. But we also have some of those same people also watch on YouTube. And especially if when we do cast and crew interviews, remember that the video versions of those will be on YouTube and the audio will be on our Podbean account. So that'll be on all the podcast platforms, will be audio. So the reason we want you to subscribe and to share and to let your friends know about it is that the more listeners we get, the more credible we become. And the more credible we become, the more we can get you cast and crew interviews. So if you could just remember to do that, we'd love to get you that content that you want to see. Because, I personally, the interviews are my favorite part. Not just because I get to talk to really awesome people, but because their insight is really, really awesome and really good. And I think really helps me look at the show in a different way. So if you want to see more interviews, just remember to do that. And next week we are also we're actually doing recap next week. It'll be episode 7 recap next week. So tune in then, and we'll see you in a week. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.